Well, after 2.5 months, New York City is still on lockdown. The entire performing arts industry doesn't appear to have any plan on how to reopen in the foreseeable future. And every major city in the country is literally being burned to the ground by riots. But I know why I'm in a good mood. And that's because you guys, we did it. The coronavirus is done. It's over. It's in the past. We finished it. And that is, at least if you've watched the media anytime recently, or you've been on social media anytime recently, you would assume that the coronavirus is over. Because this thing that has kept us in our houses since the middle of March, at least in the past 4 days, has not been mentioned. No one has mentioned the coronavirus in the past few days. Now, let me be very clear. I want to say up front, that the protests going on in the street, not only are they important, not only is the Black Lives Matter important, it's the most important issue. I mean, civil rights, it could not be more important. And the protests happening to call attention to and to break down the systemic racism in this country that has been happening since we settled here is important. These protests are important. But I just can't help but wonder what happened to this idea that we're supposed to stay in our houses. Because literally 5 days ago, if you were in Central Park staying closer than 6 feet to your sorority sister, you were being labeled on social media and the actual media as a terrorist. But now, we've had terrible things happening in our country, and there are protests happening. Now we have literally 20,000 people in the street in New York City. Union Square, we've got 20,000 people protesting. And again, let me clarify for the second time, the protest itself is important. Like, the need for this protest is absolutely there. But I'm just curious because the media has not acknowledged the fact that, judging by what they've been saying since the middle of March, this looks pretty bad, right? 20,000 people in the street. And also they show everyone on TV, the cops, they're taking the hands of the pedestrians and raising them in the air. And they say, look at these beautiful protests. Yes, if we weren't in a global pandemic, I would be saying, please, like that picture, yes, how beautiful, how important, how necessary. But I just don't understand that in the context of what we're living in, why has no one said, we were saying you're not really supposed to be near anybody else, and now we've got busloads of people in the streets, and they portray these pictures on CNN, on MSNBC, everywhere, and nobody says, hey guys, remember that thing we've been talking about for months? It's okay. I mean, this is such a hypocrisy from the media that they refuse to call out, they refuse to report the dangers of the coronavirus. In this instance, which we're like, yes, the cause of the protests is really important. It is absolutely important. But is it more important than what they've been preaching to us for months, which is that if you are near another person, you're going to die? Like, why does no one say, okay, look, these protests are dangerous. This is so many people. And the danger of this is that it makes everyone think that this is all a joke. Everyone says, well, I haven't even really heard about it. The coronavirus was all we heard about for months. And now there has been a bigger story in the news, and that is what is being preached to us. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, the coronavirus. It's like, but wait, that was like really bad. It still is really bad. And it spreads this message that when your cause is really important, which this one is, that all the other shit doesn't matter. But like, it kind of has to. You know what I mean? Like we need to be able to do both of these things. The protests need to happen. The civil rights need to happen. The institutional change in the nation needs to happen. But what about everything else? Okay. The good news is, I think I know why we haven't heard about the coronavirus, and I think it's that Actors Equity has fixed it. Because Actors Equity in the New York Times last week put out a statement that they are saying that they are here. Actors Equity is here. And they are not going to put anyone on stage on a Broadway show or any equity production until the coronavirus is, quote unquote, under control. And they have also recently, in the same week, vowed to dismantle systemic racism. That's right, everyone. The organization, the group of people that couldn't quite get a handle on online audition signups, has now decided to take on a global pandemic in addition to institutionalized racism. Don't worry, everybody. We're good. Equity's on it. I mean, look, before I rail on equity too hard, let me just say that Actors Equity is between a rock and a hard place. I get it. I mean, I'm making light of this, but I understand it. Their job is to make sure everybody's safe on stage, right? Like, that is like why they're there as a union. But the problem is we can't be safe on stage. So they have two choices. They can either put everybody on stage when it's not safe, which is going against their entire mission, or they can shut down their own industry, which is also against their entire mission. It's a lose-lose. I'm making fun of them, but I also want to acknowledge that equity can't win in this scenario because there is absolutely no plan that is going to work out for Actors Equity because it is just impossible. I mean, but one of the big problems with this is that equity, can't decide to have a thriving scene on Broadway because we are a mirror of what's happening in the world, and the world is a hot mess right now. The fact, equity is saying we want to put everyone on stage when it's under control. The thing is, is racism under control? We've taken a lot of steps for racism to get better in this country. We have the NAACP. We've had a black president. I mean, we've done so many good things towards race, but clearly we still have a problem. We had slaves in the country 200 years ago, and we are still dealing with the repercussions of this now. So I think we are living in the post-coronavirus era, and this idea that we're going to get back to normal. It's going to get under control. No, there's no controlling this. There's no controlling racism. We've been dealing with this forever, and we're going to be dealing with the coronavirus forever. We have let the cat out of the bag. We've opened Pandora's box. It's too late. And we need to abandon this idea of let's just go back to normal. Let's go back to what it was. We need to move forward and learn that we are now Broadway post-coronavirus in all regards. This, not only the safety features, but the content of Broadway has changed forever. We are now living in a new era of the performing arts. And any idea to try to go back to something else is just, it is preposterous, and it is not how it's going to work. So, has there ever been a sadder day in theater history than this week when the Drama Desk Awards, the online Drama Desk Awards, because the actual Drama Desk Awards, which were canceled due to a global pandemic, we canceled the online Drama Desk Awards due to race riots in the streets? It's so sad. I don't even know. I can't even laugh at it. It's so sad. I mean, Broadway is the only industry on earth where the entire thing could be shut down indefinitely. We're just closed. There's no plan to reopen. We have no date to reopen. And we are still canceling things. Like, when I see on Playbill.com, they're like, well, we've canceled the Obie Awards. I'm like, is that sarcasm? We canceled everything. I mean, we literally have shut down the entire industry forever. I mean, we don't even have a date to return. And Playbill's like, just letting everyone know, we're canceled. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, also, I understand. You know, I have to be honest. I'm just to get real cold, dark, serious for a moment. I mean, I watched the George Floyd tape today for the first time. It is without a doubt. You know, I've lived 36 years. I was there for 9/11. I was there for the Challenger explosion. Like, it is the worst thing I have ever seen in my life, watching that tape. I mean, watching the whole 9 minutes of it, which I think is important to watch. I have never seen anything worse than that. I mean, it made me sick. I had to go for a bike ride. I was devastated by. I mean, it was one of the worst things I've ever seen. So I understand that the need to be like a moment of silence, a pause, like something for this poor man and for the race in general. I get it. I totally get that. But why are we canceling everything? This is our moment. This is our platform to speak on. We have the opportunity to affect real change by using our voices, using our platform as Broadway artists, and we're canceling everything. Like, yes, we want a moment of silence. I'm all about that. But we don't want a month of silence. Like, why have we canceled the Tony Award presentation? This is happening weeks from now, and we've canceled that. Like, and at the end of the day, what it really is that people are scared that no matter what we do, it's not going to live up to George Floyd. It's not going to live up to what that experience was. Everything that we do is going to be a disgrace because it's embarrassing. It's like nothing we could ever come up with, nothing we could write, nothing we could perform. No performance on Zoom is ever going to even hold a candle to what this man deserved and what the race of human beings, of people of color deserve. But the answer can't be to cancel everything. The Public Theater had a benefit this week called We Are One. I mean, was there ever a better day to do a benefit called We Are One? Did that have to be canceled? To shut everything down is confirming this way of life. I mean, one of the worst things about the George Floyd video was that I was watching this cop, who I think is purely evil, feeling like he knew he was being filmed. This is what made me sick about it. He knew he was on camera, and he still didn't stop. None of these cops did anything, and they knew they were filmed. I mean, this is the way of life. I mean, this is the groundwork that we have set, and we have the opportunity to change that, and we just keep shutting everything down. Life doesn't need to stop. It just can't go on like the way that it is. We have to change what we don't want life to stop. And again, we did Broadway blackout for a day. And then everyone put up black squares and got off Facebook for a day. What the fuck was that supposed to do? And everyone was like, no, don't do that, because now we're not actually informing people about this. It's an immediate knee-jerk reaction. It accomplishes nothing. What do we remember about history? The 60s, the artists and the poems and the really profound artistic moments, right? We are listening to music of the time. Martin Luther King was art. What he wrote was art. And we are the artists, and we have a responsibility to use what we know to make a statement. Stop shying away from all of this. Stop canceling everything. Stop, being afraid that what you're going to say is not going to live up to the moment. We have got to get a handle on this and to continue making art without shutting it down. It's not disrespectful to the Black Lives Matter movement to continue to put out art. It's disrespectful to not. The government is not being thought out. The way we are being led is not being thought out. These protests aren't even being thought out entirely the right way. We need a voice that is going to be thought out and lead us, to a path of enlightenment. And that voice is Actors Equity. Okay, good evening, and welcome back to Booked It. Dr. Linda Dahl and I have been here for the past 7 hours trying to figure out how to get Zoom to work. We actually started over brunch this morning. It's now 9:30 p.m., and we just got the computer and the phone set up to do this interview. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Linda Dahl.
Thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Linda Dahl has been practicing medicine for 17 years. Is that correct?
It would have been in July. It would have been 17 years. Yeah.
It was 17 years. She's a leading expert in medicine, currently living and working in New York for quite a while. She went to the University of Minnesota Medical School. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I kind of thought it was about time, since we typically on this program have had theater artists that are here lecturing the community about things that they have no experience or training in. I figured we should finally actually get someone who has been to a class in medicine to share some thoughts. So I just wanted to. I'm so happy to have you on here. You have also been. Let me tell you, you've been the one of the leading ENTs in the Broadway community for a number of years. That's how I know your name. Because everybody on Broadway was like, you got to go see Dr. Dahl. So that is true?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds, it makes me uncomfortable. It sounds almost egotistical. But yeah, I mean, a large portion of my patient practice has been Broadway and the performing arts. Yeah.
Amazing. Did you have a love for the Broadway community before you started doing that? Or did you just kind of fall into it because of that?
It kind of fell into me. I think I actually had an aversion to Broadway, believe it or not.
Don't we all?
I mean, I was 19 when I had took my first trip to North Dakota, to New York, and I was in college, and I was in this working in this lab where we were like working with rats. It's a long story. Anyway, trying to get into medical school, and so my lab advisor, she said, "Let's go take a trip to New York City," and she's like, "Well, stay at the Y. I'll get tickets to Broadway. It's gonna be amazing." So she got us tickets to Cats and second row, and I remembered like maybe 5 minutes in just wanting to stab my eyes out, kill myself. And I'm and then that was it. I'm like, whenever anyone would mention Broadway or musicals, I'm like, I've seen Cats.
Well, there goes the Andrew Lloyd Webber sponsor. So he's got a lot of money. We need him for this. No, I've always sort of felt like you are a theater artist trapped in the body of a scientist. Is that an accurate description?
Thank you. I mean, my first love actually was the arts. I worked in costuming in theater when I was in college, and I also took a lot of art classes. And my dream was to become an artist. And then I realized, that as a first generation child of immigrants, living in Minnesota at the time, that my prospects for that were about -0. So I just pulled together what I had, and like in terms of like my strengths, and I just went to medical school because I'm like, at least I won't live on the street. And then lo and behold, which is also like kind of amazing that I went through medical school and residency and ended up in New York. None of it was planned; it just kind of happened that way. And then theater found me. And I have to say, even though like the musicals themselves weren't my favorite things, the people in theater are my favorite people.
Mm-hmm. I've always felt like as theater artists, our interests in other things are kind of what inform our work as artists. I think being a French horn player who also really loves American history kind of makes you a better French horn player in some weird abstract way. Do you find that your interest in other things? I know you're also an author. I know that I know you are an artist in your own sort of quirky, fun way. Do you find that your other interests have informed your work as a medical practitioner?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it did two things. I mean, it made the training process much harder for me, much more difficult, because my brain doesn't function that way. It's not
right.
I mean, it's not so concrete. And I tend to kind of think outside of the box and see patterns and things. And so it made the training experience almost traumatizing. But I think, yeah, the flip side of it, absolutely. I think it makes me a different kind of doctor. And so, in terms of relating to patients and especially people in the creative world, it's really been advantageous because there's a certain synergy that exists that I think can only exist because we all sort of come from the same pool.
Interesting. Do you think that did you find that specifically working with a lot of theater artists in your practice as an ENT, did that shine a light on the way that you actually looked at medicine? I mean, or the way that you went about being interested in developments and stuff? I mean, I know there's a lot of, as an ENT, like especially for actors specifically, so much of the job requires the voice and the nose and the parts of the body that the ENT deals with. Do you feel like that informed you at all? Did you learn? I don't know. Did you continue to grow as a scientist, specifically dealing with actors?
For sure, and I think that like attracts like. I think of ear, nose, and throat as medicine of the senses, and the senses are really our interface with the world. So it's how our inside world interfaces with the outside world. So there's a tremendous amount of psychology in it, as well as the medicine and the science and the anatomy. It's fascinating. But when it comes to performers, there's just so many different levels that are at play, and I love working with performers because I can tap into all of those different parts, and performers will do anything. I mean, it's like if it means being better at their job, I mean, they will do diets, they will adjust their lifestyle, they will do whatever it takes to heal themselves and to stay healthy and to stay, really sort of centered. And that it's so rewarding to be able to work with that kind of population. I think for most doctors, I always joke that if I was in North Dakota or, anywhere else, I don't think I could practice ENT, just doing like the same thing every day to people who kind of don't really care. I don't think I could do it. So it just makes it, very interesting. And I have to come up with kind of out of the box treatments, last minute treatments, I joke, people come in, like, I don't have a voice. I'm like, all right, how much time do I have? A week? Do I have a day? Do I have 2 hours? Like sometimes it's like, I need to be on stage in an hour. I'm like, so it really, made me kind of up my game and come up with creative solutions to things.
You're like the bomb detonator of Broadway. Is that true? People have come to you and been like, I don't really have much of a voice. I have to be on stage in a couple hours. That's
Oh yeah. I mean, Tony season. So I was joking at the beginning of this, and now I can't really joke because it's really not the same. I was saying, like, at the end of this, pandemic, I'll say this pandemic had nothing on Tony season, but because I mean, it was really like middle of the night phone calls and theater call, showing up at the theater because the lead that doesn't have an understudy can't go on and do something. And there's, I can't name names, but I mean, I had one instance where this, big name actress, it was like 7:30 and she called me and she's like, I have no voice. You're going to be on stage at 8. She's like, but I have no voice. I'm like, even if I could magically appear with you right now, I'm not carrying around steroids and a scope in my purse. And to which she's like, well, why not? So
Dr. Dahl, I mean, so you've never actually been, correct me if I'm wrong, you've never actually been hired full-time by a specific production.
No.
I just know that your name is like I've always heard your name as like, oh, that's who we go to. Like, that's who the singers go to. That's who we see. That's always been for years now. They're like, oh, you just see Dr. Dahl because that's who it is. You sort of had the, the run of the entire community sort of, in your office. So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here is, well, first of all, I was tired of lecturing the Broadway community about science when I've never taken a science class post high school. So that's number one. But let's just chat for a minute. I mean, this is such a complicated conversation, but I want to talk about this, what feels to me like an ideological divide in the city right now about the way in which we're going to go about moving forward from this. It seems like we have got like two camps of like people that want to shelter in place and then people that are like, no, I want my freedom. I want to go out. I mean, do you have any specific thoughts on what is the most realistic, and what do you feel like is the way that we are going to move forward from what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first problem, I mean, I just want to back up a little bit because I've been watching this thing from the beginning on every level, especially as an ENT, because I was treating hundreds of people who all tested positive, after I was like suctioning out their mucus. And I had the symptoms in February now that I look back. I mean, I didn't know it was COVID at the time. But then hundreds of people I took care of. And what I realized in my practice without knowing it was COVID was that I had to treat people early and sort of aggressively and really creatively for whatever this thing was. And they were all getting better, which was great. And then the shutdown happened. So, I mean, I know for a fact that this virus was circulating for months before things were shut down. So it's already everywhere. I mean, it's already all over the place, right? And then the nature of it, we were told originally, is that you can only transmit it through aerosols, which means that the only way you can catch it from another person is if they like cough in your face and then you touch your face, like droplets, like lots and lots of virus snotted on you. Which is, what I was exposed to. But then they said, okay, so go home, shelter in place so that you don't spread it to each other. We're going to like ride this thing out. And then when we flatten the curve, then we're all going to go out and just kind of live our lives. Right. And it's just taken this crazy, I don't even know the route that it's taken. It's been crazy from my perspective, watching it. Because immediately I prevented from seeing my patients immediately. March 17th is the last day I had a full day of patients. From that moment on, I think the shutdown was announced on the 16th to begin on the 22nd of March. So that gave everyone 6 days to flee the city and spread the virus all over the country, which is what happened. 6 days, that's a lot, right? And then everyone else that was like left trapped here for whatever reason, they couldn't go somewhere, or like me, I was like delusionally thinking, I'm going to help. I want to be here and like take care of people. Then at that point, by the time the actual shutdown happened, people were not leaving their homes. And the message to everybody was go home, ride it out, and only come to the hospital if you're going to die. Like if you can't breathe, then come to the hospital, which drove me crazy because I'm like, that's not how, that's like me saying to my sinus infection patients, go home and wait till your infection goes to your brain. And then now when you're dizzy and your vision's blurred, show up at the hospital and get in line for a test. And then once you get the test, go home. And then in a week, we're going to tell you what the test showed. And then come to the hospital because then we're going to put you on a ventilator. I'm like, what is this? Even without knowing what COVID was, I'm like, this is inhumane. This is not how we take care of patients. You don't tell patients to go home and wait till you're about to die. And this whole notion that the only thing you can do is put people on ventilators was completely ridiculous too. And it's actually really proven to be wrong. I mean, there were all kinds of red flags going on in my head when that happened. And now, so the data that's come through now is that once people get put on a ventilator, their chance of living to get off the ventilator is 10%.
Right.
10%. So the answer is not go home till you're about to die and then go to the hospital and get your life saved on a ventilator, which is what the message was, right? So then they're like, okay, wait, everyone's, quarantining. It's not really quarantining, it's staying at home. And they're like, well, let's just wait till we, the curve. So the curve happens, right? So when did the peak happen? Like if you look at the dates of the peak, it happened exactly 2.5 weeks after we started to shelter in place.
Right.
Which is exactly the incubation period of the virus. So then I'm like, this is great. They're going to force herd immunity, which isn't a bad thing. It's like, we're going to have to face it one time or the other. It's like, it's really just a matter of timing, so that the time to eradicate the virus came and went. There was 2.5 months of it spreading around. And then they're like, we're going to quarantine you. And then everybody fled. So the time to eradicate the virus was long gone by the time we started the quarantine. So then when the quarantine happened or the stay at home happened, everyone was exposing each other in closed spaces where you're rebreathing each other's aerosolized virus. Right. So, and that's, I think, because in New York City, we're all in apartment buildings, the people that stayed here, and Queens, it was all like undocumented workers. In Brooklyn, it was a large part of the Jewish community that has a lot. They kind of live in multi-generation situations like the Bronx. It was a lot of projects. So it's like, look at the populations of people who had huge spikes, and what they all had in common was living arrangements, that it's multi-generational living with really tight corners in apartment buildings where the air is circulated. I mean, I was getting patients like 3 weeks in that were starting to get symptomatic. I'm like, how does this make sense if you're quarantining at home? If staying at home prevents the spread, why are now 80% of the new cases from people who've been quarantining at home for 2 months?
I know quite a few people that got COVID after the lockdown, and they're like, I literally haven't left my apartment without a mask and gloves on for more than a second, and they got COVID, which I think would support what you're saying, which is that it's like in the vents of their apartment building, I think, right?
Studies have shown that too, that it's in the ventilation systems. It's in the ventilation systems of the hospitals. It's in our sewer system, and they're tracking viral spread in the sewer system. So I was joke, like, why are they not making us, like, why are we not allowed to fart? Why are we allowed to fart in public if it's also in our gut, right? Like, you can't cough or sneeze, but farting's fine. But I mean, it's basically, it's like in our whole system, right?
Right.
Also in the ventilation system. And the size of this thing, like, just for, comparison, the size of this virus is about 120 nanometers, which is a little bit bigger than the size of the flu virus, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what do we do when people have influenza? Do we quarantine them at home and put masks on them? No. Why not? Because you can't prevent the spread of influenza with a mask. Influenza, however, is spread through droplets. So you need a lot of influenza to get sick. But coronavirus is much, much, much more easily spread. Okay. Those N95 masks that people are talking about that they're wearing in the hospital and everything, they were designed for tuberculosis. Tuberculosis, the size of that mycoplasma is 4,000 nanometers.
Bigger or smaller than corona?
Corona is 125, and tuberculosis is 4,000 nanometers. And people who have tuberculosis, it's so transmittable that if you're working with them, you have to wear the mask, and they have to be in a negative ventilation room. Right. That's how you control that massive tuberculosis. Coronavirus is 125 nanometers. So I'm like, okay, so the mask, this is what the mask helps. If you are sick with coronavirus or any virus, or even tuberculosis, let's say, and you're sneezing and coughing, then you can sneeze and cough into the mask, and then you won't get those droplets transmitted to other people.
Sure.
That's what masks help with. Do they filter out the virus? No. In fact, the studies have shown too that when people talk or speak through a virus or through a mask or cough, the virus gets trapped in the mask. So then if you touch the mask and then touch something else with or without a glove, then you're spreading the virus that way. It's like the science behind it. I'm racking my brain with the science of it, just saying, like, how is this preventable? And the other thing that really worries me is that people who really are high risk of, if they get the virus, they have a higher risk of dying. They're going to walk around with these masks thinking that they're being protected somehow, but are they?
Right.
They aren't really. So it's like a false sense of security for people who are at high risk.
Right.
And if you're coughing and sneezing, like, oh my God, could you imagine somebody coughing on the street at this point?
Right. You'd be shot.
You'd be shot. Yeah.
I want to ask you this is the $64,000 question. What does a return to a theater setting look like post-coronavirus? Is there a possibility that we are going to open a theater where everyone wears masks? Or are we just going to have to kind of suck it up and go in and be like, I may get it, I may not. If I'm going to die from getting it, I'm not going to go see a show. What do you think? What does the future of this look like?
There's just so much, speaking about the polarized sort of, do we stay home or do we leave? I mean, there's about a million different options in between, in terms of timing and who goes out and when they go out.
Sure.
And and I think, first of all, the theater's ventilation systems are 100 years old, and they're chock full of all kinds of stuff. Personally, the hardest thing about seeing shows for me used to be when the AC went on, I would get a sinus infection every time. I mean, I would sometimes get bronchitis just from breathing in the air from the
in the audience, you mean?
in the audience. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and the theaters are notorious for being full of mold and dust, and, people would get sick all the time. So I think cleaning up the ventilation systems is wonderful. And I think engineering a different type of ventilation system would be amazing anyway. I mean, it would clear out, why don't they just have really clean ventilation systems that vent instead of recirculating into the theater,
Right.
they just vent it outside, because the virus has a harder time living outside. And, they can have automatic temperature checks like that matters. I mean, my God, fever, anyway.
I keep hearing these people say things like, well, I'll be in a theater as soon as they get a vaccine. And I'm like, what is the vaccine prognosis looking like right now?
Vaccine, that's one of my favorite topics. So first of all, there's never been a vaccine for a coronavirus in the history of the world.
Okay, so that bodes well.
Well, just, and why?
Right.
Because usually it's just a common cold. Also, the really severe coronaviruses before this one, like SARS-1 and MERS, which is the Middle Eastern one, they are so toxic, so lethal that they didn't infect as many people, and they kind of died out more quickly. MERS is still around, but SARS-1 is gone. So this particular virus, it may die out, it may continue, but we could come up with a vaccine. They could come up with a vaccine, but we've never had one for a coronavirus. And we also don't understand immunologically how to measure for it, because we've never measured for it. So as just an example, a comparison. So the closest comparison I can make to this type of vaccine is the flu vaccine.
Right.
We get like measles, mumps, rubella vaccines. We get hepatitis vaccines. Those are all very different organisms and viruses, and our bodies respond to them differently. But influenza is probably the closest thing to a coronavirus. Every year there are, I don't know, probably, I'm going to say 10, maybe like 20 to 50 strains of influenza in the world. And the World Health Organization picks out 4 strains that are most likely to affect a given country at any time. And then they create a vaccine. That's why there's a flu vaccine every year. And then they give it to the population that is most at risk. But nobody's measuring antibodies. Nobody really knows what kind of immunity people confer from those. It's just a guess. And so, but guess in a given year with a great vaccine, guess how many deaths are prevented by the flu vaccine every year?
I have no, I mean,
25% on a good year.
Wow.
So there's no, so it's not 100%. So it's not like saying I got a measles vaccine and now I'm never going to get measles, or a smallpox. Right. Those vaccines are for different organisms, and that you get a vaccine and you're done and it's over. Like this, there's so many what ifs for this.
So this idea, I mean, I hear this all the time of this, like, they're like, we're waiting for that magical vaccine, when all of a sudden we get it and it just, and it's done. But I'm like, also, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have to get a vaccine, right? So like, isn't that problematic?
Now that's a political question, right? I mean, they're actually trying to pass trying to pass, I think it's a law for New York State in the House of Representatives right now, to make it legal to walk into somebody's home if they have a suspected case of COVID and test them, pull them out. I'm serious.
I mean, that sounds, personally, that sounds scary to me. Because where does that information come from? They're like, oh, we're just going to walk in your house because we suspect it? Like, what is it, and what needs to happen for someone to suspect it?
Okay, which gets back to the original point. The original point was, why this polarization, right?
Yeah.
And that's this part is the saddest part to me, right? Because we're not giving the virus to each other, right? The virus infected our country and our cities, right? And the government's responsibility was to protect us from that infection, right? And for whatever reason, I have no idea why, but they didn't. And they let it go crazy, right? And it's like, our country has more rampant cases than anywhere. New York City has more than anywhere in the world. So for whatever reason, they didn't control the spread of the virus. And now it's here, right? So what do we do? And now all of a sudden it's our fault. It's like, oh, you're killing your neighbor by going outside. Well, and all of our right, like my right to practice medicine has been taken away. Like I'm not allowed to see my patients. I'm not allowed to scope my patients. I'm not allowed to let sick patients into my building. So it's literally illegal for me to practice medicine, to treat patients for the very thing that this pandemic is causing.
Yeah.
And that's insane.
That's something, and there's something fascist about that too, which is like,
and
right?
I'm racking my brain to understand the science and the medicine behind it, because I'm like, if I'm the one, like, I know I had it, I know I can't get it again. I mean, I was swimming in it for months.
You're the perfect person to treat people
I'm
for it right now.
I'm the perfect person to treat people. And I even begged to be on the front lines. That's another thing, the hospital systems, how they decide who goes and who doesn't. And that's a whole other discussion. Whatever, I was never called to go. I was never allowed to go. So I'm just like, so I have this perfect skill set to treat all these people. And I'm literally, I lost my practice. I had to fire my staff. I had to shut down everything. I had to vacate the premises. And like in the fall, now when everybody really starts getting sick from all the things that were put off, like who's going to take care of these patients? Like I can't afford to keep this crap going on for, 6 months to like.
Do you think we will see an uptick in other illnesses like strep throat, like whatever, any other shit that is around New York City?
Absolutely. I mean, because they can't keep us inside forever. I think what's going to happen is people in the summer are going to start going out, and it's going to be like, oh, great, look, it's gone, and people aren't getting as sick anymore and whatever. And then I think in the fall, it's going to be a combination then of whoever hasn't gotten COVID, and then who starts getting influenza and strep throat and bacterial infections and ear infections and all the other things, like heart attacks and all the cancer that was put off and wasn't treated. I mean, it's going to be an avalanche of illness by the time the fall comes, because they are not letting doctors' offices work.
Right. My dentist wouldn't see me for my 6-month cleaning. I mean, that sounds so ridiculous, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not good to go a year without having your teeth looked at, because then you can get It's like, that's a very minor example, but imagine that on a bigger scale.
So there's a dentist. There's a dentist upstairs from me too, and they're only seeing emergencies. But even that, like the drilling is risky. Anesthesia for surgery. Oh, they can risk dispersing the particles just with the intubation. So think about what about all these people who have active cancer that can't get surgery, or who have they can't walk because of chronic pain and they need hip replacements, or they're having a heart attack. Like all of those COVID deaths, all those deaths that they're counting as COVID. And this is the thing, that's not made up by the media. The CDC reports it that way. Look on the CDC website. They literally say presumed COVID. They say we tested these positive. This is presumed COVID. This is COVID with influenza. This is COVID with pneumonia. Like they really differentiated it. And there are, I think the last time I looked, there were 6,000 deaths that were just presumed COVID, but maybe they were the people who had heart attacks who couldn't come to the hospital.
Right. This guy drove his Cadillac off a cliff, but we're thinking he was coughing on the way down.
Right.
So, I want to talk to you for the next 8 hours on here, but unfortunately our time is limited. I just want to ask one final question in just the last minute that we have. What do you see, what changes do you see happening in the city as far as precautions taken, lifestyle changes? Like, what kinds of things do you think should happen, and what kinds of things do you think will actually happen as far as moving forward from this?
Well, the city, Manhattan proper, has really been emptied out. I mean, everybody that could leave did leave. And there's graphs that show that too, that the wealthiest people and the people that had the option to leave are gone.
Right.
So I think that, and then somebody asked me the other day, she's like, well, when will it go back to normal? I'm like, I don't know, like crowded subways, standing in line, like at Shake Shack, and like, I don't know, like never getting into the restaurant you wanted to go back to that. Like, I don't.
Right. I'm sure coronavirus started at Shake Shack, by the way. If there was a ground zero for coronavirus, it was fucking Shake Shack.
Probably. But so I think that through the summer anyway, I think things are it'll be easy to keep things sort of like not super full, because there just aren't a lot of people here.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the Midwest, and I went to school in Minnesota. So now I feel like I'm in Minneapolis. Like you can drive places, you can park, you can, and I think like when restaurants and places start opening up, it would be kind of cool if you didn't have to have the next person like sitting in your table. You know what I mean? It'd be nice if you had some space in between.
I've always thought that was nice.
Yeah. And if the rents go down, which they're going to have to, then people can afford to have like that kind of a lifestyle. So I think if you look at it that way, then it could be nice, but the vast majority of the country and the suburbs are already kind of living normal lives. Just be aware of that, because their lifestyle.
Oh, that's a good.
Like
it's a great point.
It's a city problem. It's a Manhattan problem. It's a downtown Los Angeles. It's a downtown Chicago problem because our lives are not in our homes. Our lives are like out in the rest of the world. But the suburbs, they're like, what pandemic? They're like,
and New York tends to. That's a great point. And New York tends to think of New York as being the epicenter of the world and also a microcosm for the world, which it really isn't. Like when you're living out in Lincoln, Nebraska, your day-to-day life is not what it is when you live on 72nd and Broadway. So,
like the outrage about, oh my God, they're going to go out and they're all going to die. I'm like, it's not the same. It's not like not going to be on top of each other. Like you go to a grocery store in the Midwest, you're like, there's like 4 people in the grocery store on a normal day.
It's not the same. Even an hour outside of Manhattan into New Jersey, it's not exactly the same.
Concentration.
Dr. Dahl, I'm so thankful to have you here. We could talk. They would need to unplug the computer because we would be going on for so long. But thank you so much. I'm so glad to have you here, and you're just divine. You look amazing. I don't know what quarantine is doing to you, but you look just what is it?
I've never had such a break in my life.
You look stunning. Okay, we need a pandemic once a year for Dr. Dahl. Thank you so much, Dr. Linda Dahl. Look her up. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, you've written a book or you wrote a book? I'm sorry.
I've written 2 books. One is a memoir about the time I was the only female ringside doctor for professional boxing.
Right, that's right.
It's called Tooth and Nail. And then I wrote a clinician's guide to breastfeeding, and I just sold another book proposal for a breastfeeding book for moms that's called Suck It. So now
amazing.
I've got something to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, Suck It with Linda Dahl. Thank you so much, and we'll chat soon. Be safe. Okay, bye.